Since the dawn of first-person shooters, video game console companies have yearned for their own version of some of the most popular FPS games to grace the genre. Wolfenstein on Super Nintendo, Doom on, well, everything, Duke Nukem on multiple consoles. You kids get the point. While the PC is definitively the birthplace of the FPS genre, video game consoles were quick to notice the popularity of the genre and fought tooth and nail to find ways to port these games, explicitly designed to take advantage of PC hardware, and shove them into cartridges for mass consumption. And while these ports have all been successful to varying degrees, the amount of quality that has come out of them has fluctuated all over the place, to the point where merely mentioning the words Sega Saturn port fills FPS gamers with dread. Of course, as time passed, consoles quickly became disinterested with only having the scraps of shooters that were built for PCs, so game companies began experimenting with wholly original titles for consoles. I'm gonna be straight up for a second. I adamantly dislike console shooters. While I recognize that a lot of them are of high quality and have been very well received and are no doubt very well made, I emphatically dislike playing them. Call me a snob, or don't, because I know I am, and I refuse to apologize for it. But the concept of playing a first-person shooter with dual analog sticks sounds about as fun, and plays about as well as picking up individual grains of rice with a pair of oiled-up chopsticks. I've been a mouse and keyboard guy my entire life, and the darkest years I've ever experienced as a gamer was begrudgingly playing through BioShock and Rage on my PlayStation 3, simply because I did not have a powerful enough PC to play some of the latest first-person shooters on the market. You know, I actually thought that BioShock was a terrible game until I finally played it on a PC and realized the problem wasn't the game, but the delivery method and how I played it. I even stopped playing first-person shooters altogether for a while, because if my only option was to use a shitty dual-stick controller, then no fucking thank you. Now, that's not to hate on Halo, mind you. Halo is a fine game on PC. And that all being said, the best controller I've ever used for playing first-person shooters on a console is this guy. I genuinely believe that this is the best console controller ever devised, and I think it makes the perfect companion for console first-person shooting. Don't at me, don't run to the comments and try to argue with me, because I'm firmly set in my old man ways here. This is strictly my own personal opinion, and I already know you disagree with me. Then again, mentioning the words N64 and FPS in the same breath inevitably brings up this monstrosity. Listen to me, kids. And listen well, because this is a topic I will never revisit. I hate this game. I hate GoldenEye 64 with all the vitriol that I have in my heart. Detractors say that Halo ruined first-person shooters. I say that GoldenEye ruined first-person shooters. This fucking game is the epitome of lowest common denominator. While I totally understand that this is a party game FPS and not a serious FPS, that doesn't cover that the game runs at maybe 15 frames per fucking second at the best of times, 5 fucking frames per second at the worst of times, with muddy-ass graphics and explosions that look like someone lit a fart on fire after eating a bean platter at the local Mexican restaurant. The controls suck, the graphics suck, and people really only remember this game for the 4-player bullshit split-screen shenanigans, and that's it. I have never understood the love for this game, and I never fucking will. And that's why I can't stand GoldenEye. So with all that said, I actively avoided console shooters during the 2000s, and as such, that led to me missing out on the topic of today's video, Quake III Revolution. Now, id Software's games have all enjoyed being ported to consoles, but I feel like Quake III Arena seems to have found the longest shelf life when it comes to ports and various iterations over the years. We have the base game, which released in 1999, Team Arena, which released in 2001, Quake III for the Dreamcast in 2000, which still has a dedicated online fan base to this day, Quake Arena Arcade, which released onto the Xbox Live Arcade in 2010, and, of course, Quake Live, which also dropped in 2010. But while all of them captured the manic mayhem of multiplayer malevolence that Quake III was known for, all of them missed out on something that the game was genuinely sorely missing a single-player campaign. Released on March 26, 2001, Quake III Revolution was a port of Quake III Arena for the PlayStation 2. Developed by Bullfrog Productions, which you might recognize from the game's Populous Theme Hospital and Dungeon Keeper, and published by Electronic Arts, who you might recognize as the recipient of the consumerist's worst company in America in 2012, Quake III Revolution, or Q3R as we'll refer to it for the rest of this video, was a primarily single-player conversion of Quake III Arena, which supported local split-screen multiplayer as opposed to online gameplay, and was criticized at launch for not having the aforementioned online play, but also for its lack of mouse and keyboard support, and also for long load times as compared to the Dreamcast port of Quake III. And I mean, like... Yeah. Now, back in the day, I had a PC powerful enough to play Quake III, and a 56K modem for multiplayer deathmatch. Even if I had been giving console shooters of the day any kind of attention, there was simply no reason for me to pop the disc in my PS2 and take it for a whirl. Well, kids, there was a reason for my vitriolic intro, and for those of you who managed to get to this point and not just turn off the video and leave a pithy comment, here it is. I need to eat crow and admit that console shooters, regardless of the control scheme, have some valuable and interesting facets that I have never given enough credit. Of course, and I'll get to this later on in the video, playing with dual sticks is very much not a comfortable or enjoyable method for me when it comes to FPS games. But here with Q3R, I have a game that I genuinely wish I had played during the PS2 heyday because it offers a compelling, fascinating glimpse at how technological limitations can lead to design innovations. Make no mistake, this is definitely a Quake III game through and through. From start to finish, everything we get to experience in Q3R is drawn from Quake III and from its expansion, Team Arena. But Bullfrog has very keenly and wisely gone through each map and remixed them all, from weapon placement to the bots that we face on each one, delivering a surprising and welcome breath of fresh air to an experience that would otherwise feel incredibly bland to a veteran of Quake III on the PC. For example, on House of Pain, where I would normally rush to find a rocket launcher, there is now instead a plasma gun. And there's a surprise double damage over here in the sewer grating, where on PC there's nothing at all. Meanwhile, over here on my personal favorite map across every iteration of Quake III, the Proving Grounds, the map remains mostly unchanged with the exception of a surprise nail gun from Team Arena added in to shake things up a notch, which it absolutely does. The Team Arena nail gun is a fantastic version of this weapon, which fires a spread of harpoon-like nails in a shotgun scatterburst. The only disappointment I have about having it in here is that it wasn't used more. It's this novel utilization of different elements across both base game and expansion pack, which makes Q3R feel like a greatest hits package in a way. And even if that was the only novel aspect that the game brought to the table, it would be enough. After all, a PS2 port of a PC multiplayer game without actual online multiplayer is gonna have to do some work to feel worthwhile to either A, Sony fans who have been wanting to play Quake 3 but didn't have the PC to do so, or B, PC fans who also have a PS2 and want to share a favorite game with friends who game on consoles. And again, just the way that these levels have been remixed and mashed together is honestly an exceptional effort enough to justify checking out this game. But Bullfrog didn't just remix these elements without a plan in place. You see, Q3R has an actual factual story to it, which is fucking wild. At the opening of the game, the player is asked to choose between one of 5 characters to play as for the campaign: Sarge, Damia, Doom, Klesk, and Anarchy. I do think it's kind of funny, haha, that one of the characters you can pick to play as in this Quake game is the Doom guy himself. Like, okay, guys, yeah, I get it, Doom is popular. But this being a Quake game, I would have gone with someone else, like, oh, I don't know, maybe fucking Ranger? But I digress. Each character is going to have their own stats, such as health, armor, speed, you get the gist. As we progress through the game, these stats will actually upgrade, and we'll even get neat aesthetic changes to go along with those upgrades as well. For my playthrough, I played as Sarge, and Sarge's visual evolution here alone is stellar. A fantastic reward for sticking out the campaign all the way through, and it genuinely makes me want to replay the game as the other characters just to see how their outfits change over the course of the campaign. Now, I said there was a story, and in this story, whichever character we choose is entering the Arena Eternal for the first time. We have to fight our way up through the ranks of the warriors of the arena, starting out as a lowly slave, conquering our way up to the status of warlord. As we climb the 5 tiers of warriors necessary to reach the finale, we'll be chided and taunted by an unseen figure called Vadragar, who is the creator of the Arena Eternal and our final boss. This here is probably Q3R's biggest deviation in terms of how the base game was handled. See, in Quake III, the backstory is that the Arena Eternal was created by a race of beings called the Vadragar, and in Quake Champions, we learn that the Vadragar aren't actually a race, but a type of Lovecraftian beast who has ascended into a type of cosmic deity in the Dreamlands. Q3R simply boils it down to a point and gives us Vadragar, a malevolent arena master who also just happens to be the announcer for the game. Now see, that's called loving what you do. Don't just be the final boss, be the announcer. Make everyone listen to you talk until they can't stand it anymore. Okay, it's time for us to dive into the meat and potatoes of Q3R. Because the game isn't content to simply rest on the laurels of dropping the player into round after round of direct death matches, but we get to run the gauntlet of multiple game modes, which as far as I can tell, are wholly unique to the Quake III experience. Sorry, I just couldn't help it with the pun. Q3R has several different game modes that we are going to be faced with. Deathmatch, Possession, Capture the Flag, Kills versus Time, and Elimination. Deathmatch is the easiest to visit, as it is exactly what it says on the tin. You versus however many opponents the game has decided for in this round, and the first to a certain kill count is the winner. Possession is a fun mode, albeit one that's easy to cheese. In this mode, it's you versus a group of bots, free-for-all style, and the goal is to pick up the white flag somewhere in the map and hold on to it for a cumulative amount of time, usually 1 to 2 minutes. If you pick up the flag, everyone is going to come gunning after you, which means that you're going to want to focus on running versus gunning, because if they frag you, then that flag drops and someone else is going to be able to pick it up. Simultaneously, if someone else has the flag, you better get to hunting quick because that timer can stack up real fast if you're not careful. I actually like this mode a lot since it provides more of a focus on movement mechanics versus straight up kill count. Although, like I said, it can be a little easy to cheese this one. All you really have to do is grab the flag and find a corner to hide in for however long you can instead of running around the map. Depending on the difficulty you set the game to, you really could just coast through this mode in a single minute if you get the flag first. Next up is Capture the Flag, and this one again puts more focus on foot speed versus frags. I found myself utterly fascinated with this version of the classic multiplayer mode, as I don't think I've ever seen it done like this anywhere else. Where normally we would see 2 evenly matched groups competing to capture each other's flag and return it to base, here we have a solo character against 3 or 4 bots, and the objective is for the player to grab a neutral flag somewhere in the map and return it to a specific point, also at a point unknown to us at the start. So we need to duck and dodge the blue team as they come hunting for us. Their sole objective, to prevent us from taking the flag to the drop-off point a total of 3 to 4 times in a row, and we will need to do so within a set time limit. Capture the Flag here is simultaneously thrilling and frustrating. Thrilling in the sense that we're tasked with deathmatch parkour, just like in Possession mode, avoidance versus direct confrontation. However, the frustrating part is that with the controls we're given and the vague starting point of our objectives, it can be far too easy to lose this match the first time playing through. And since losing the match means running out the clock before we've caught the flag enough times, that's kind of a long match just to lose, just to start over again. And both the flag and the drop-off point are placed in spots that require the player to really search each and every corner of the map to figure out exactly what and where we're looking for. So if you don't know off the bat where we need to hustle to, you could potentially waste a bunch of time just searching for either the flag, the drop-off, or even both. The final frustrating nail in the coffin is that the bots have a tendency to swarm around the flag in order to keep the player from nabbing it. Whenever the player picks up the flag but gets fragged before stopping by the drop-off, the flag is dropped wherever the player was jibbed. So when we respawn, we already know where to go to pick it back up. Unfortunately, there's also probably going to be 2 or even 3 bots waiting for us there to dickishly pick us off before we can move the flag again. So good luck with that. However, if you get it right, there's a genuine sense of agency in being able to nab the flag, run the gauntlet, drop it off, hoof it back, grab the flag again, zipping around in a looping pattern until we've scored enough captures. This mode has me going back and forth on it a lot. I like it, and then I don't like it, and then I like it again. Capture the Flag stands as one of the weakest modes in the game, even though it's also kind of one of the strongest when it's running on all cylinders. I think that if the game supported mouse and keyboard rather than just analog sticks, this would be a potential banger. Kills versus Time is a unique twist on the deathmatch mindset, in that we're locked into a free-for-all deathmatch round, but the twist this time is that we're not trying to score higher than the other bots. We're trying to hit a set number of kills within a set number of minutes. And since this is free-for-all, the other bots will be fighting each other as well, meaning they could potentially deny you points if you're not fast enough, adding some sweat to the ticking clock hanging overhead. But it's elimination where the truly sweaty gameplay comes into the game. Elimination matches see us fighting against a set number of bots, each with a set number of lives. They enter the arena in waves. When we've cleared out a bot enough time so that they don't have any more lives, the next bot teleports in, ready to take us on. We have to clear out every life of every bot until there's no bots left to fight, and only then have we won the match and we can continue on to the next tier of challenges. But there's a catch. We have a set number of lives ourselves, and if we get fragged too many times, we could potentially run out of lives before we finish fragging all of our opponents. Elimination fucking sucks, but not in a bad way. Elimination is the mode where I yearned the most for the mouse and keyboard controls. Using the dual sticks to try and bob and weave and aim during this, the most stressful and hardcore of modes, in which there feels like so much is on the line and we only have so many resources in order to narrowly squeeze through, I fucking got murked left and right, oftentimes one death immediately after the other, and I found myself cursing and swearing and shouting colorful metaphors as I struggled to maintain control of the field in these elimination matches. But it also made it so that these wins, when I eventually did conquer the field, were the biggest reliefs of the entirety of the game. A truly Sisyphean achievement that usually saw me with only a single life left. Seeing those stats increase and that outfit upgrade was such a reward in and of itself. Not gonna lie, on paper, this is great stuff. It is, however, really hard to recommend it with dual stick controls, mostly because I'm not a fan of dual stick controls for first-person shooters. And these dual stick controls are also still in the pre-Halo phase before they were truly dialed into perfection, which means it is an absolute miracle that this game controls as well as it does. Q3R is the third first-person shooter ever released on the PlayStation 2. And yes, timing-wise, it came out several months before Halo, the game which is considered to be the first to truly hit that gold standard of left-stick movement, right-stick direction in console first-person shooters. Now, we can argue all day about who did it first. Research tells me that QUAKE II on the PlayStation in 1999 is our best candidate with a somewhat awkward version of the modern dual-stick controls, although Alien Resurrection on PlayStation in 2000 is the first confirmed usage of left-stick movement, right-stick direction as we know it today. But for Q3R here to be the third FPS title released on PS2, and thank you IGN for that confirmation, this genuinely actually feels and plays really, really well and about as close to our modern Call of Duty counterparts as we can get it. Now, first off, I do want to mention here that I am, in fact, playing this game through an emulator, which isn't illegal considering I used the ROM file of the copy of the game that I already own, as you can see here. So I did have the option of utilizing a mouse injector to play this game for this video. However, I'm not a tech guy, and try though I might to get a mouse injector working with PCSX2, I just couldn't figure it out. I'm sure there's workarounds, and the injector that I found said that it was compatible with Q3R, so I have a feeling that the game's innate lack of support for mouse and keyboard may have had something to do with my woes. Consoles were experimenting with utilizing mouse and keyboard peripherals at the time, so for a port of a game that heavily utilized mouse and keyboard to not have the option of using that control scheme, it was met with heavy criticism. In hindsight though, maybe Bullfrog was on some forward-thinking bullshit with the lack of options in that control department here. Dual stick controls, as you already know, quickly became the default for console shooters with the release of Halo, much like WASD quickly became the default for PC shooters with the release of Quake. And don't flood the comments telling me that you were using WASD before Quake came out. The point here is that it became popular and was standardized after the release of Quake, just like dual stick controls became popular and were standardized after the release of Halo. The options here for controller bindings are pretty impressively versatile. I chose to use the advanced settings, in which L1 was jump, R1 fire, L2 crouch, R2 zoom, and the X and O buttons swapped between weapons. Again, an impressive setup, one which is mind-boggling mind-bogglingly simple, and foregoes the usual jump bound to X problem, in which you have to move your right thumb from the stick to the button pad in order to jump, making it so that you can't smoothly turn your character while jumping. With the jump bound to L1, there are no issues while jumping and turning simultaneously. A breathlessly exciting bit of fresh air to behold. I was surprised with how well Q3R handled, I'm not gonna lie. There's sensitivity settings to play with, and I most certainly did have to play with them in order to dial in my preferred movement speeds, but overall, I was astounded that this was a console shooter pre-Halo that felt this smooth and agile. I mean, as smooth and agile as it could be. Look, I'm not gonna pretend like I'm suddenly on the side of dual-stick controls here. They've never felt natural to use for me. Mouse and keyboard are so much more precise and intuitive that I will always prefer that. And yet, here we are, at the end of Q3R. I've conquered all the elimination modes, I've risen through all of the tiers, and now we just need to get through the final boss of Vadragar himself. We've already faced off against Vadragar in one of the elimination matches previously. When he appears, he has a set of health points that we need to deplete, rather than simply frag him a number of times. At the end of all things here, we need to destroy Vadragar's force field projectors, then face off against him directly, all while we have a limited number of lives to do so. Although we do have the benefit of a BFG and a chain gun and a quad damage on our side, so as long as we can avoid Vadragar's insanely powerful attacks long enough, we will prevail. Did I mention that Vadragar's attacks fucking hurt like shit? Because Jesus Christ. Once Vadragar is done, we get a nice little send-off with the end credits, but once the credits wrap, Bullfrog has a sweet little surprise for us. A completely original map just for this port called The Keeper, which is based on and around Bullfrog's Dungeon Keeper games, and features two new combatants from those games, the Reaper and the Mistress. This is a fun little bonus feature that doesn't really impact the whole of the game as an experience, but when it comes to post-game content, this genuinely put a smile on my face. Quake III Revolution is a tidy, streamlined, fun little package that takes everything great about every iteration of Quake III and not only distills it into one version of the experience, but even innovates with the interesting single-player campaign. Playing through the campaign here with the variety of game modes, the maps drawn from both Quake III and Team Arena, is like the perfect highlight reel of everything that makes Quake III great. Of course, that being said, there are a few downsides to the game. First off, this is an insanely short game, maybe 3 or 4 hours long, depending on what difficulty you set this sucker at. That said, the opportunity to play through as one of 5 different characters, one of them being the Doom guy, each with their own stats and outfits during the evolution of the campaign, does make it a little easier to hop back in and replay from start to finish. But one of the downsides of a greatest hits package is that there are some deep cuts which get left out of the experience. Q3R is focused on providing content that was originally built between 2 games. However, that makes the weapons, maps, and bots we face seem a little piecemeal at times when Bullfrog is clearly behind the scenes picking and choosing which tracks to add to the playlist. This means that, even though the nail gun is a most welcome addition to a Quake III package considering it only appeared in Team Arena, we really only get to use it in 1 map, maybe 2, but I can't actually picture off the top of my head or find in my notes that the nail gun appears anywhere other than the Proving Grounds.
Future Ranger here, kids. Upon reviewing my footage, it turns out that, the nail gun does appear in at least 2 other maps. The problem with this is that one of them is a capture the flag map, and the other is an elimination map against Vadragar, so I barely used the weapon because I was too busy trying to do other things, which made it a blink and you miss experience, which is why I couldn't remember that I actually found them in here. Anyways, I gotta get back to work. Fucking timelines.
The chain gun appears in 2 or 3 maps as well, which again, when taking into account that this is a weapon which really only shows up in Team Arena, getting to wield it merely a couple of times in this game feels borderline criminal. Obviously, the star of the show here are the weapons and maps from Quake III, reutilized here for maximum single-player effect. That and the new single-player modes, which would be really welcome in a remaster of Quake III. But when the chips hit the fan, wait, no, that's not the metaphor. When the chips are on the table, Q3R ultimately ends up being a midday snack versus the satisfying meal that I genuinely wish it was. This is a great diversion, a template for something that would be larger and grander if it wasn't for the limitations of the technology. If Q3R had been developed today, I could see a more robust leveling system, where we could tweak our character to a personal preference rather than simply watch the preset stats go up with every tier. Imagine creating a unique character and collecting cosmetics the further we go through the game. There doesn't have to be a deep narrative or anything like that, but something that adds to the Gladiator-esque storyline of rising through the warrior ranks, towards the goal of freedom and escaping the Arena Eternal. We could even get this, as it is, quickly remastered and re-released as a mobile game, for crying out loud. Of course, if we want to get a new version of Q3R, there's going to be some rights management involved, more than likely with Electronic Arts, because, as it turns out, Quake III Revolution was the last game to be developed by Bullfrog Productions. Okay, so, I already mentioned at the top that Bullfrog was a legendary development studio, and they were, but for you kids who are here primarily for the boomy shooties that we talk about on this channel, and less about the simulation games that everyone else likes to talk about, let's take a quick trip down memory lane to pay some respects. Bullfrog was founded in 1987 by Les Edgar and a gentleman who you may know by the name of Peter Molyneux. Molyneux is an icon in game design, having spearheaded such games such as Populous, Syndicate, Theme Park, Dungeon Keeper, Black and White, Fable, the movies, and Goddess. Most of these games were made while he was at Bullfrog before his departure in 1997 to co-found Lionhead Studios. By the time Bullfrog was getting ready to work on Q3R in 2000, the once legendary studio was being quietly run into the ground by Electronic Arts. You see, after the departure of Molyneux, EA thought that they could run Bullfrog with a series of experienced managers to direct the developers to work on multiple games. But as it turns out, they were going in the complete opposite style that Molyneux had established, which was to work on one game at a time and give his devs space to work. Rather than a fourth entry in the Populous series or a third Dungeon Keeper title, EA decided to reallocate assets within Bullfrog to have them focus on both Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings franchise games, even though Bullfrog never ended up actually working on a game for either license. Instead, Bullfrog hammered out one last theme park game, released on February 1st, 2001, which was then followed by Q3R's released on March 26th of the same year. Soon after, Bullfrog was merged into EA UK. Molyneux has had his controversial moments over the years, none of which that I'm going to talk about here, but at least he knew how to keep a studio running. But in the case of this game, and in the potential for a possible remaster, the question is, who's got the rights to this? Obviously, Quake belongs to id, belongs to Bethesda, belongs to Microsoft. But since this particular port was published by Electronic Arts, are the publishing rights tied up with that company? And if so, do we need to untie some knots with EA in order to see this get a remastered digital release? I would ask if Bullfrog has any say in the matter, except that Bullfrog was absorbed into EA. So it's all just a question of how much stake EA has in the rights surrounding this game, and what it would take to get this title back in the hands of gamers at large. Quake III Revolution is an utterly fascinating, and yet ultimately just barely satisfying entry in the Quake franchise. We have uniquity, we have history, we have brevity. Come for the unique single-player modes, stay for the whirlwind through Arena's greatest hits, but walk away after a couple of hours a little disappointed, and a little frustrated, due to the truncated weapons and maps, and also the not quite yet fluid dual-stick controls. I really do appreciate what Bullfrog managed to accomplish here with such limited resources, though. The PlayStation 2 is probably my favorite console of all time, right behind the N64. Right behind it. Right, like, real, I mean, the N64 is, you know, it's, okay, the N64 is the best. But being able to play some Quake here is surprisingly, and honestly, kind of neat. The biggest downside to Q3R isn't the game itself, but rather the inability to play it anywhere without emulation. Quake III Dreamcast's experience has been modded for Quake III on PC, but Q3R is nowhere to be seen. In fact, without the existence of a potential Quake III remaster from Night Dive, we probably won't ever see Q3R's gameplay on PC. This is a fun, concise package that fans of Quake III deserve to have more access to and would enjoy playing, despite being as short and sometimes as sparse as it is. Do we need a remaster? Or, hell, even a remake? Absolutely yes. id, Night Dive, Bethesda, hear my cries, please. Somebody go shake some hands with Electronic Arts to make this happen. But in the meanwhile, this little 6.5 out of 10 gives me some warm feelings, a little joy, and even though I know it's not going to be readily available anytime soon for anyone who doesn't have emulating or modding tools, I sure am glad that it at least exists. Thank you kids for coming along on this journey with me. I know that this video is a little shorter than usual, but yeah, this game wasn't nearly as beefy as I was hoping it to be. But I am glad we came here and sat down and got to experience this. Check out my Patreon if you want to get to access videos like these earlier than you would on YouTube, and also help support my channel. Now, sit up straight, eat your vegetables, and keep your eyes peeled for some discounts down at Spirit Halloween. Don't make your mom spend a lot of money on your costumes this year. And, always, make sure you stay hydrated. I'll see you kids next time.